Welcome into the Field Vision Football Podcast. I am Felix Johnson, joined by our head of football operations, Cody Alexander. Cody, how you doing today?
Doing great, man. Can't complain.
Awesome. We're being joined by Eagles Eric, the co-host of the Philly Film Room and the creator of the NFL Stat Oasis. We'll get into much more of that here as we go along. Eric, how are you doing? I mean, it's been a great couple months for you. We just talked about it a little bit here. I'm a Chiefs fan. Obviously, you're Eagles Eric. Been a great couple months on that front. So how are you doing today? But on a larger scale, how is it to be an Eagles fan these days?
You know, it's great. Obviously, as a Chiefs fan, you know what it's like winning the Super Bowl. But then you blink and all of a sudden it's like free agency is there and then the draft. And I remember in 2023, I feel like I had months and months and months to study these prospects coming out. And I watched every single snap of Quinyon Mitchell, every single snap of Terrion Arnold. And I'm like, here's all the reasons this guy's better. And before I could blink, the draft's basically around the corner. And I feel like there's 100 guys. People are like, what do you think of this guy? And I'm like, I haven't watched them yet. So the nice thing is now I have like names to watch. But it's such a crapshoot with the amount of players the Eagles are going to need to replace. I don't know which positions and which players to even spend my time watching. So it's a little bit funny that way, but it's a nice problem to have when you win the Super Bowl.
Well, and we can start there. And we talked about it a bunch, and how Vic Fangio really tore apart the Chiefs offense, and we just haven't seen anybody do that, even despite the Chiefs offense being as reduced as it has been. We haven't seen them shut down like they were in the Super Bowl. But overall, and the question I have is, how did the Eagles beat the Chiefs' ass that bad? Like, sure, you can beat them, but they beat the hell out of them. And that's just something we weren't prepared to see. We hadn't seen it in a handful of Super Bowls. I know that I'm a little bit younger than some people, so we've seen blowout Super Bowls in the past, but not in the last few years. So how did the Eagles do it? I mean, it's as simple as they were better than them, but there's something more to it, too.
Yeah, I kind of think of three things initially. Number one, the Chiefs' decision to kind of push Tooney out to tackle and throw in that mailman at guard. I think that was a terrible decision and backfired. Not that the alternative was much better, and I'm sure they're smart enough to like make the right decision, but it obviously didn't work out. And ultimately, you had a player who played not even Division I football last year, Felix Hunt, wrecking the game against a guy who, had he played guard, Joe Tooney, is playing still at an all-pro level, but he's really terrible as a tackle. So that hurt. I thought Mahomes was gun shy. Watching the film back, there were some tight window throws that I think he typically would have thrown, but he didn't. He kept pump faking, should have let it go. And then there was a few he rushed and then missed the throw. They couldn't connect with Kelsey. And then they had no run game. So once you become one-dimensional against Fangio, he has all these designer coverages to keep eyes on Kelsey. You get behind and you can't make up the points. Now it plays right into the Eagles' hands. So that's kind of how I saw it unfolded. Did you either of you guys have like, different perspective on how they were able to accomplish that?
Yeah, I mean, anybody that's followed me forever knows I'm a huge Fangio guy. Goes back to, I've probably written on him more than probably anybody since 2020. I thought it was a masterclass in essentially what Fangioism is. There was no time where Travis Kelsey didn't have at least two people on him, one low, one high. And now teams have tried to do that before. It's just they had the mechanics to do it. Typically you're going to have some sort of a bracket, but it's like a man with a spy, right? And then what happens if the spy is not right or you don't have the good man coverage? What I thought Fangio did as well is essentially what modern zone defense does, but he did it at such an elite level. It's essentially, we're going to change the math with the secondary. We're going to be +1. So anytime you went with trips, we were going to have 5 guys over there because we don't think you have an X receiver that we can't lock down. And so you actually you're flooding this. I go back, and this is interesting because I just got done watching the tape. I go back to when the Raiders played the Chiefs at home. So the Chiefs were at home. Max Crosby and that Raiders defensive line probably hit Mahomes on almost every play. And he looked, it was almost a mirror image of that, of what he looked like. Just kind of just, he's getting sacked and he's going down and he's just throwing balls. So to me, I thought exactly what you said. They bet that their 4 defensive linemen would be able to win at a high enough rate that they could then really force Mahomes to have to play quarterback. And now I get it. He's one of the best, but he's really good when he's out of the pocket and when he's making plays and when he's not necessarily just the pure drop back, passer, right? Him having to actually get down to the check down and then maybe have to go back to another but by that time it's a sack. So yeah, D-line dominating and then them just flooding the zones where they needed to, depending on where it was, I thought was the key to them winning. And it was really awesome to watch.
Real quick, to add on that, you made a great point with corralling him in the pocket. I thought the Eagles probably did the best job I've ever seen against Mahomes. Their initial rush was pretty vertically upfield, but they would immediately start to cut it off if Mahomes started to maneuver up in the pocket. And every single time they closed that escape lane and he basically sacked himself.
Yes.
So there'll be there's definitely some technique coaching and strategy coaching of okay, when he does escape the pocket, how does he actually like to do that? And then when you didn't have Tooney in there, creating room as a guard, once he went to escape, there was no room. It was just like Milton Williams waiting for him.
Well, and Cody, correct me if I'm wrong, because you obviously have more coaching experience than I do. But I think from a philosophical standpoint, when you have rushers getting as vertical as the Eagles were, you have to have a run game to kind of eliminate that from a defensive line perspective, because if they're blowing past the line of scrimmage too far, then they're not going to be making the play at the line of scrimmage, obviously, if they're bursting past it. And I'm thinking about it from the Chiefs' perspective. They had no run game for the last month of the year, 2 months of the year, including the playoffs. And the Eagles were like, all right, we're just going to keep rushing the passer. And it just became a pretty simple game plan. And obviously you guys get into the nuances of this is what we need to do to stop Mahomes from doing that. But at the end of the day, it was the Chiefs aren't going to run the football because Andy Reid's not going to. Let's just do whatever Vic Fangio does. We have the perfect defensive coordinator for this.
Well, I think you saw the pendulum swing back in the Super Bowl. It was kind of the chef's kiss, right, of the whole season. This whole season we were talking about the run game, then play numbers. Points are really low. What are we doing? Well, for the last 5 years, and really starting a decade ago, we were on a slow march to kind of the spread era of football. We then get into it in 2018, right? And we have that, and I've mentioned this multiple times on a lot of different places, but we had the basketball game between the Chiefs and the Rams, right? We all remember that.
Greatest game of all time.
I mean, it was wild. But everybody was like, when did the Big 12 become the NFL, right? And so now we've had that slow march back. And so we see the pendulum swing back where running matters. You can't just go out and play 7-on-7. So, it goes back to, the whole, what was it, 3-4 years ago, running backs don't matter. The passing is more efficient.
Last year.
Yeah, I mean, even then, yeah, because remember the running backs had this, they were all going to get together and talk about why are we not getting paid and how does powwow. And I mean, it was just, guys, that's how fast football flips, because it's like, it's not important until it is. And then it's like a damn right, like it damn's fine until it's not. And so then finally you have that. And I think even it goes back to what you were talking about, Eric, with the interior of the line. Andy Reid's talked about before of where your interior offensive line sets essentially the pocket depth, and the width is actually set by the tackles. So as you're getting penetrated, as that pocket collapses around you, if the quarterback can't step up to make a throw, it's really difficult. And like you said, they had layers, they had it. And Felix, back to your point, if you run to win, you pass to score. And if you can't run, it's really, really hard to win because you can't control a game.
Absolutely.
Real quick on that, could I just add one thing? The Eagles kind of skirted by almost the entire playoffs without a single team committing to the run. So you Green Bay, they got behind and they got really injured. Then you go to the Rams in the snow and they got behind and they like to throw it. And even when they do run, they have no explosive run threat. Washington had no explosive run threat outside of Daniels. And then the Chiefs got behind. And even if they weren't behind, they still couldn't run it. And early on in the season, the Eagles got destroyed by the Falcons in the run game. And then they were like, all right, we have to figure out this, go back to ground, like, blank canvas and figure out these run fits. And for the rest of the season, they had hardly any tests. I don't know why teams didn't try to do it more. They had Nolan Smith out on the edge, some smaller, lighter linebackers. Yeah. So I see if you had any thoughts on that.
Oh, it's a conundrum, right? And why we've known for a long time, really, the Fangio system is not great at fitting the run. Because that's not what it's designed to do. They play gap and a half up front. They're just trying to slow people down. They want their backers to be able to be in coverage. They want a heavier foot in coverage than they are in the box. You have to have a dominant defensive line in this system. We found this out with, even Staley at the Chargers had, struggling. But I go back, you're right. You go back to that Falcons game, or even when they teams that could run a little bit. This is a team that you can't get behind because they'll kill the clock on the other side. And then it's a perfect example of what team building should look like. Your offense and defense should be complementary. And so you have a driving offense that can just sustain drives forever. They can go 15, 12. They don't mind going long. Then on the other side, you have an offense that really is not allowing you to throw the ball at all deep. So you're chunking everything out. So you're slowly watching that clock, right? Like you keep looking at the clock and you're like, that clock is going down. So you go into panic mode. And what do you do when you panic? You just chuck it up, right? And so you start throwing, which is exactly what Fangio wants you to do, because most of the NFL quarterbacks are average. He's going to give you some sort of a weird look on the back end or make something look the exact same. You're going to end up throwing an interception. And again, it was just amazing to watch. It was one of my favorite Super Bowls to watch just because it was just a masterclass on both sides of the ball. I'm not even hey, look, I also enjoyed it because I'm a Broncos fan. And anytime I can watch the Chiefs lose in the Super Bowl, it's awesome. So no, but it was like you said, Eric, why did teams not commit? It's kind of a two-way street there. One, they get behind, and then two, they gotta, it's not necessarily conducive to what a lot of these teams were trying to do because they felt like they had to keep up.
Yeah. And shifting sides of the ball, talking about a complementary team, Saquon Barkley had the best year a running back has ever had, and we mentioned it here, but a year ago, all of the running backs were basically saying, oh, we're not getting paid, we're not doing whatever. And it was, I think, the best response to it was what Saquon did, where he went out and had the best year anybody's ever had, what Derrick Henry did post age 30, going out and having a great year. And so I think it's kind of interesting, especially for teams like Baltimore, like Philadelphia, who have committed themselves to running the football effectively, and even more so in Philadelphia's case. And this kind of brings me to my next question of how are they paying everybody? Because everybody on the team has crazy money and everybody's good. Like all 5 offensive linemen are in the conversation of being in the best at their position. It's the best wide receiver duo in the league. Jalen Hurts has money. The entire defense is going to have to get paid. There's not enough money in the world, but somehow there's enough in Philly. How is Howie doing it?
Yeah, that's actually a really fascinating question, and it would take an hour to properly answer it. But
sure,
the concise version is the owner gives Howie the ability to operate in a way where they can pay a lot of guaranteed money up front, which for people who don't know, this means they have to stow away the money in escrow. So that you basically have to have a treasure trove of cash that you're ready to stow away for years and years. Then they have established relationships with agents, and over time the players start to see what's happening, where they can sign contracts with a bunch of option bonuses that kick in future years, and they run concurrently. What happens is this spreads the cap hit out thinly over more and more years. So what happens is they embrace dead cap. So once their players are off the team, like Brandon Graham, Jason Kelsey, Josh Sweat, this year the Eagles will have like $50 million in cap devoted to those guys. They're not even on the roster. Other teams, they may be not willing to be like, oh, we're going to pay 10% of our cap to guys who are not even on our roster. We don't want to do that. Whereas the Eagles get those guys for cheap cap percentages while they're playing, and then say, oh, we'll live with it in the aftermath. So it's kind of a two-pronged thing between the ownership giving them the ability to sign these type of contracts, establishing the relationships with the agents to get them to trust the Eagles, and then picking the right guys. Because one of the problems with signing contracts like this is if it goes bad, you can't really get out. So, which is something we saw with like James Bradbury. It's something we're seeing with Bryce Huff now. So for the Eagles to get rid of him, they're still going to incur a pretty good dead cap charge, which means if they do trade him, they're going to get nothing at all in return, even though he's going to be like paid $17 million next year. So hopefully that kind of explains how they're able to do that. You mentioned it briefly too, which is right now, a lot of their defense is not getting paid.
Exactly.
But they will be soon, which is why Howie ripped the Band-Aid off this offseason and said, okay, no Milton Williams, no Josh Sweat, probably going to trade Dallas Goedert. They traded CJ Gardner-Johnson. Ironically, Saquon's only going to take up 2.9% of the cap.
Right.
So paying a running back top dollar with a Howie-like contract structure is still peanuts.
Exactly. I think too, you mentioned it, and this is Felix. I'm just putting a little bit more salt into the wound. I don't know if you know who the owners of the Denver Broncos are, but they are multi-billionaires. And so when you are a billionaire, you have the ability to kind of stow away this cash, which, Eric, you hit it on it, is that you have to have. That's why it's such a big deal on these voided years, is that not everybody can do this. So like teams like the Cardinals, teams like the Bengals, who like are notorious, like they're old established NFL families. They don't have a business on the side. The Commanders, sticking in the East, the Commanders are another one where they have Amazon money. And so essentially like,
just say the hunt. I know you want to say it. I know you want to say the hunts. It's fine. It's fine. I'm okay with it.
No, but the Chiefs obviously do a really good job of mitigating some other, and the Chiefs are a great organization. What I'm saying though is that that some of these newer teams, these new blood owners, are able to take kind of these, hey, I have all of this money saved up, we can do this. And then so they just kick the can down the road. And so yeah, they're constantly in like 50 million in cap hit, like dead cap. But like you were saying, Eric, if you're drafting correctly, right? So you're bringing in young guys, you're not necessarily bringing in these free agents that are like high dollar value guys. You're bringing in like a Zach Bond who ends up being an all pro, that you're doing your homework. I think that to me is where the Eagles are different than almost anybody else. They draft, as good. They have drafted as good as almost anybody over the last 5 years. And then you combine that with some of the free agents that they're bringing. Like for them to pay Saquon was absolutely nothing. He's like a third of what A.J. Brown is making. So it's like, oh yeah, that's not a big deal. And then we can kick down these incentives and do things like that to where we can then stack these contracts. It just makes sense. And I think that model, I think you have to do that now with the way that quarterback contracts are going to be, is because the quarterback contract is going to take so much. You either have to draft really well or you have to be really smart with your cap. And I think that's what the Eagles have been able to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. Real quick on Hurts specifically, some teams are devoting 20+% of their cap to their quarterback. And that's why the people always talk about capitalize while you have the rookie capital.
Right.
But Hurts he's only getting 9% of the cap the way they structured it, and he's got one of the biggest dead cap numbers like ever in 2029, like almost 100 million. The details might be a little bit off there, but what they'll do is, as that approaches, they'll just sign him to an extension. So
and reset it.
As long as the salary cap keeps going up by 7 to 10% per year, it's good to write checks that you don't have to cash till the future, because the power of the dollar is worth more now than it is in the future. And that's another thing that the Eagles do, is they'll sign their guys to extensions as soon as they possibly can. It's so the cognitive dissonance from Jerry Jones about we're going to wait so we have all the information to make the best decision. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. Either you wait and then you lose the guy, or you wait and you pay them the top dollar. You can't win.
I never understood. You knew in year 2, CeeDee Lamb was going to be a top 5 receiver in the NFL. Okay. The moment that you can give him an extension, you give it to him. And whatever that number is, by the time that you wait, that if you waited until the very end, that you're probably actually going to get him at almost a 50% discount. It's the same thing with Micah Parsons. Why are you not just shelling out? And the other fact thing too, is we all know Jerry's rich. Let's not beat around the bush here too.
Exactly.
He got cash. So it's not like he couldn't just do exactly what the Eagles are doing. But here we are. We're on an Eagles podcast, Felix. We can't be talking about why are the Cowboys terrible.
I was gonna say that's the exact problem I have with what the Cowboys are doing, is that they're just as rich, if not richer, than Jeffrey Lurie. Like, I mean, it's crazy that they're not just paying the guys when they find out that they're drafting well. Like, you guys are doing the right things. And I mean, like, the NFC East is so interesting because there's so many good players, but the franchises have been so weird. And I think with Philadelphia, they've been incredibly sustained for a very long time. Because I mean, Lane Johnson, he's been the best right tackle in football for the better part of a decade, was drafted in 2012, and they've been drafting that well all the way up until Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and Nicole, like these.
Not Jalen Reagor. Not Jalen Reagor.
Oh yeah,
not Jalen Reagor.
Hey, Waxahachie zone. Don't be careful. That's where I'm at. So yeah.
So real quick, I don't know if you guys know this. Jeff Lurie, he tried to buy the Patriots at first, and they said, "Sorry, you don't have enough money." So then he's like, okay, I'll settle for the Eagles now. And he did so good with the Eagles. Now he has enough money to shell out all these contracts.
Yes,
it's kind of ironic.
Good.
That's fun.
But, and so that kind of leads me into where we were going, or where we're headed at the end of this month. And that's with the NFL draft. We've talked about how great the roster is. They beat the hell out of the Chiefs, the dynasty of the time. So it's such a strange and interesting thing and I know this as a Chiefs fan over the last couple of years, is like, who kind of fits into this roster? Where is the hole? Because the offensive line is good, the defensive line is good, the linebackers are good, the secondary is good, don't need a quarterback, weapons are good. Who is the improvement? And probably in the first round, because that's where you find most of your difference makers. But where is the improvement to be made for the Philadelphia Eagles?
So the writing is on the wall that Dallas Goedert is going to be traded. They probably are just making sure they get the right compensation. Like, if they can get a 4th rounder, that's probably what they're hoping for. So that immediately makes a tight end a need. Right now they have Grant Calcaterra, and they signed like Harrison Bryant and Kylan Granson. So there's not enough, players who could play inline and detached there to form a actual legitimate tight end group. They've traded away CJ Gardner-Johnson, which vaults Sidney Brown into the starting role. He's such a lunatic on the field where it could work, but it could blow up famously. And I can't imagine Vic Fangio wants such a high variance player, which is probably one of the reasons they got rid of Gardner-Johnson anyway. But we saw what happened in the Super Bowl, which was the back end. Yeah, it was great, but perhaps it didn't even need to be great because of the pass rush being so good. So I'm targeting interior defensive line and edge early in the draft. There's so many players. It's in specifically interior defensive line. I have probably 11 or 12 day one starters. Edge, it's kind of a flavor of the month draft where there's all different sorts of edges. So you could probably find one who fits your need. Now, Eagles probably are in a position where someone will fall into their lap. Every team, every year, every fan base gets pissed. How could they let the Eagles get Jalen Carter? How could they let the Eagles get Quinyon Mitchell? Well, with Quinyon Mitchell, nobody wanted a corner. Nobody else wanted. Had they wanted a quarter, they would have taken him. That it was actually a miracle that Howie didn't panic and trade up. He's just sat cozy at 22 and took him. That's what I think will happen this year. They'll sit there at 32 and they'll let, someone like Walter Nolan or James Pierce fall into their lap. And then you can address tight end and safety in the later rounds. There is a good amount of tight end depth in this draft. And safety, there's never that much depth, but compared to like previous years, I think there's quite a few players where you don't necessarily need to splurge on a Malachi Starks or Eamon Worry. So that's kind of how I see it shaking out. But happy to discuss specific players if
I think one area that y'all need to be careful with is the corner opposite Quinyon Mitchell. You start looking at some of the names on the roster, and it's Eli Ricks, I'm not excited about. They did sign a Dory Jackson. I don't think he's going to be a long-term starter. Then you go to Keely Ringo, was that Georgia. He was good. He's really super fast. He's a little stiff-hipped. Do you move Quinyon Mitchell to the boundary? Do you let him play to the field? I think Ringo's more of a kind of a boundary corner that needs to be in a press, which is not a big Fangio thing. So I would say too, I think you kind of hit it, is that you probably take a best available defensive lineman early. And then that second round, you look for a value corner, and then maybe get you a safety in the third round that can maybe play. Because I do also agree with you with Sidney Brown. It's like the problem with Sidney Brown is will he stay on the field? And then Lewis Seen isn't the answer behind him. Tristan McCollum was good, but do you know is he going to be a starter? So I think that's going to be the thing, that you didn't go out and get anybody in free agency. Not that I really thought that the Eagles were going to, but you're kind of hitting a reset in that secondary. But there's a very particular player that you need to go after in this secondary. It can't just be somebody that's like a man dominant corner that comes from a man or a lot of on ball. He needs to be somebody that can play. That's why I thought when Quinyon Mitchell, they got him, I was like, well, there you go. This is a marriage made in heaven. He played a lot of quarters in college. He can play off, he can play on, he can do a bunch of different things. So I do think, don't look past corner early, because that is a major need. I think they can live with Sidney Brown if they need to, but you cannot go without having another corner in this defense.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. They definitely need corner, but I keep thinking about this. There's no way they would have decided, we're not going to pay Isaiah Rodgers $5.5 million.
Yeah.
We're not going to pay Darius Slay $10 million to put Keely Ringo out there. So there has to be a plan. Either they know Keely Ringo is better than people think he is. I don't know if that's the case. Or they're going to trade for someone. And I floated a name out there and I don't know if Seattle is willing to move him, but Reek Woolen would be such a sweet pairing off of
riots on the street.
And I've looked at what they would have to sign him to an extension. Obviously, that first year is always discounted with the way they stretch out those void years. It would make them a little cash strapped with Carter and Smith's extensions coming up, but it's doable. And then you have probably the best corner tandem in the NFL for the next several years. So that's something I've been thinking
I'll storm
about.
the link. I won't let it happen. I won't let it happen.
Reek Woolen is like a black hole on the boundary side, and with his length and playing a little bit of zone in that system would just be, that's not fair. So no, let's not do that.
and the great thing is Fangio, he keeps the outside corners out of the run fits.
Yes, which is really good for Reek Woolen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He's not dude. People don't realize Reek Woolen is 6'4", almost 210 pounds. And the fact he may be the worst tackling corner in the NFL. At least he was last year. So you're that big, but man, he just wants to play corner, which like you said, in the Fangio system, that's perfectly fine, because they'll be able to fix it some other ways. But no, if that's actually really interesting, Eric, and that would be, actually, to be honest with you, that would, if they could pull that off, or maybe somehow parlay Goddard getting traded to getting using a pick or something to get Woolen, I think that could be really cool.
They were the number one in defense in football last year. Do they need to get better? Like, let's just leave it alone.
Right. Exactly.
This one more thing before we get out of here. The tush push. It was talked about in the league meeting. 16 teams voted against it, if I'm not mistaken, if I have that correct. Obviously, the Eagles have benefited from it. I wouldn't say that they tush pushed all the way to the Super Bowl, but it obviously had a big impact over the last 3 seasons, and it obviously is a bit of the identity. But it being thrown into question, does that kind of, we know this is a team that can be so based on the vibes, I guess. Is this something that can kind of boil up over the offseason, and then week 1 is not as kosher as it could be? I'm just trying to look for reasons why they won't be as good because I'm hurt. That's all.
Yeah.
That is all.
I think if they just did a traditional quarterback sneak, they'd be really good. And I think with those, some of the best offensive tackle pairings we've ever seen, and Saquon Barkley, there can get a yard anyway. Mm-hmm. So I think I don't know, maybe I downplayed the significance of the tush push. I think the main thing it does is give you security and confidence of like, if we really need this 3rd and inches or 4th and inches, we've got something in the bag. And so maybe that makes your second down play call different than it would have been otherwise. Or you can like commit to the run more on early downs because you know you got that free yard. And that has a hidden value. The play itself, I could take it or leave it. And I think, Hurts behind Juergens with the threat of like Saquon on the outside with those tackles, that's a really high conversion rate anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a perfect storm because it's a perfect offensive line to do it, and you have the perfect quarterback to do it who can basically squat a house. I think that, I've got an interesting story with this. So the guy that actually taught the Eagles is a good friend of mine. His name's Richie Gray. He's from Scotland. He's the only human being to coach in all 3 major contact sports. So that's the NFL, rugby, and rugby league and rugby union. And so he's been doing some work with NFL teams for the past couple of years, but he's the one that taught him how to do it, and it's unstoppable. So I don't want to see it go away because I love Richie, and I love to see that it having success. That's, I think the thing with that is that I think that's where it comes in, is that kind of the story behind it has this like rugby vibe to it. And so, well, this is football, this isn't rugby. There's not much of a difference between what they're doing and a quarterback sneak. You do get the kind of like, you can't push people. I do understand that. The health concerns, I think, are a little bit much. Wasn't it the Bills were making a big deal about it, but like they ran it like the most.
They were doing it wrong. That's on the Bills because Josh Allen was doing it wrong. He was
he's just going to the same side
every time he tried to sneak. So shut up, Buffalo.
But I do think it's an interesting argument for, it is kind of a scrum play. Are we defining football? The NFL has always notoriously been like, I think it was only a couple of years ago that they let unbalanced lines come back in. So it's always one of those, like we're trying to keep the purity of the sport. But to me, I don't know what the biggest difference is between what they're doing and like a traditional quarterback sneak. It's again, you literally have somebody that can squat like 700 pounds at quarterback. Wow. It makes sense. He's not going down. So it's like, you got to stop it at some point.
And one of the things I think is under discussed is it's a run to the left. Dickerson, and maybe Richie Gray has more context or gave you more about this, but Mailata and Dickerson come crashing in this way, blow everyone completely off the line, and Hurts runs to the left. And if the defensive line shoots down low, he just goes over them. And if they stay up high, they just cut them and go under. And so it's like, that's why it was unstoppable. Eventually, I forget which team it was, but they kind of thwarted them on one of these 2-point conversions from the one, I believe in the playoffs. And they realized it's a run to the left, and they stuffed them. I think teams are getting a little bit better, but then we saw Chris Jones basically hurt himself to defend the tush push, right? He just stuck his neck directly into the play.
It's never good.
Yeah,
that was stupid. That was just I don't know. That game, you guys, it was the greatest Super Bowl of all time. That game sucked. That was horrible. My heart skipped a beat when that happened. I'm like, is Chris Jones? I don't know. Whatever.
My smile just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
I'm ready to wrap this thing up. Can we Eric, go ahead and plug anything that you may have, and then we'll get you on your way.
Yes. So all my stuff right now on Twitter, EaglesXsandOs. I co-host the Philly Film Room show. We're kind of working behind the scenes, kind of expanding our content. That'll be coming soon, probably around the draft. But I'm working on a lot of research projects. Couple things I got in the pipeline. One is an algorithm that'll identify trade pairings in the NFL. Oh, this team has an extra edge rusher, but they need a corner. Well, here's another team who has the perfect match for them. Contracts are coming out every day now. I have a contract projection tool that I posted a lot of guys out there, and it's been unbelievably accurate. So that's something, if you're interested in contracts, you can look into. And yeah, I'm just continuing to expand my presence on different podcasts, and it's been great. So
awesome. We appreciate you spending some time with us. I let you gloat for a little bit for about a half hour. So Cody, you got to deal with me next week. Appreciate you guys listening all along. Follow us on Instagram at Field Vision Sports, on X at Field Vision MI, and we'll see you next week.